Who caused the bite of 87? What's in the FNAF World box? How was the crying child put back together? What was the one thing Scott Cawthon retconned? When do the two circus babies locations open? What is Junior's 100%? How is FNAF World connected to the canon? Security breach? What is the timeline of events? Well, I think I've solved it. Timelines. I've personally made 3 entirely separate ones that go against the other, and every other FNAF YouTuber like Game Theory, FNAF, Toast, and more have all made a multitude of them too. But today I'm landing on what is my final timeline, besides the ruined DLC, by going about it in a different way. Most people like me tackle the timeline by having all the information from everything, and then piecing it together start to finish. Yes, some go game by game for information, but they don't form a timeline as they go, and they leave it till the end. But what if we start with FNAF 1 as if we were in 2014, and then go along in that way? This may lead to less confusion if we just go in release order of the information, instead of trying to juggle so much information at once. And it may be a bit more understandable for you, the viewer, by continuously showing you the same timeline image with its new inclusions, instead of making you remember everything I'm saying at once. Disclaimer, there may be times where I mention a detail that can be thrown away due to future details just to avoid confusion, but I will be very verbal about what I'm throwing away. So let's begin this theory. Remember, this is just a theory. FNAF 1 is our unmovable point. We have a company named Fazbear Entertainment and a restaurant called Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that contains Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Golden Freddy, all of which are possessed by the spirits of dead kids looking for revenge that we read about in newspaper clippings, mentioning how 2 kids went missing and then eventually 5 were linked to the missing children's incident, who were all lured away by a man in a mascot mask, and their bodies were stuffed into the animatronic suits, which made people complain about the disgusting odor and smells coming from them, which eventually led to the location closing down by the year's end. It also reads how the suspect was convicted and charged, but they never found the bodies, which led to his release, which we know happened, and is why I'm throwing this piece of information away, due to Help Wanted's death message saying nothing was ever proven in a court of law. We know the missing children's incident has happened at another Freddy's location, due to the closing newspapers being in this location of course. We also learned from Phone Guy about the bite of 87, where someone was attacked by an animatronic and lost their frontal lobe. The player of FNAF 1 is a man named Mike Schmidt, and the game happens on November 13th, with the year unknown. Although MatPat from Game Theory made a theory about how the game takes place in 1993, which the Phone Guy also dies this year as the previous guard. Now let's quickly clarify that year, due to what people have recently been saying. Although many these days try to prove 1993 wrong, Scott himself said that MatPat's first theories about FNAF 1, 2, and 3 were mostly correct, besides obviously Purple Guy being Phone Guy. And he has mentioned how absolutely nothing stayed hidden from the first game, which would include a main point in all theories placing the game in 1993. Later we learn this is still correct in these modern days of FNAF lore, due to the unused FNAF AR Fazfax, which claims things such as Fazbear's Twisted Pizza recipe was roasted most yummy by 6 out of 10 children in every Saturday from 1988 to 1993, and how in 1993 the most dangerous profession in the United States was actually night security guard. So we now know that this location opened up in 1988 and closed in 1993. We also know that FNAF 3 happens in 2023, 30 years after FNAF 1, due to Henry's tapes being called HRY223. Yes, we learned the opening date years after FNAF 1, but I want to 100% this piece of information to prevent future confusion. So now we have this timeline here, 100% guaranteed, although we don't know when the missing children's incident occurs yet, so that stays out of our 100% timeline for now. Now we move on to FNAF 2, where we learn that this location closed only weeks after being opened, after the bite of 87, which itself was caused by another missing children's incident, which we can call a dead children's incident instead, just to clear confusion. And because as we see them, they aren't missing, that caused the new toy animatronics to become possessed in the FNAF 2 location, which we know due to the location size. We know this is a different set of murders, because the toys start malfunctioning and become aggressive. And we see that the Wizards, which would become the original FNAF 1 animatronics, known by how they're called original mascots, and that they're being moved to a smaller location, the FNAF 1 location, are already possessed, moving around and already aggressive, which would mean that the first missing children's incident happened at another Freddy's before this, which closed by that year's end. The new set of 5 children become Toy Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Mangle, and Balloon Boy, and all the new spirits get freed once the location closes and their toys are forever scrapped. But we're still missing an animatronic's possession, the puppet. We learn that a child was left outside of a location, most likely Fredbear's due to the Freddy we play as, being an entirely different sprite to the original Freddy we play as in other minigames, meaning it's most likely Fredbear we play as, and then Purple Guy, our killer, who from now on I'm calling William Afton because A, it's easier, and B, although we learn it years later that is his name, murders them and drives off, which leads to the puppet's possession, signified with a jump scare. After William had stuffed the children into the original suits, the puppet then guides the spirits into possessing the originals. These cutscenes here are called Dreams in the Files, most likely just reiterating that the FNAF 1 location is just the reopened original Freddys for the company to save money with their now smaller budget. We learn from Phone Guy about a Fredbear's family diner being another old location, and also learn in Night 6 that the location is closing in one more night after a final party, and that he doesn't know why we are there, which is why we actually play as two players, one being Jeremy Fitzgerald during the main 6 nights, and the other being Fritz Smith in what we can call Night 7. We learn from the fired note from Fitz that they are the third guard. The second guard we know got moved to the day shift for the final party the next day due to the investigations about the missing children's incident, which then the second guard turns out to be the victim of the bite of 87, due to Phone Guy telling him to stay close to the animatronics as they're acting weirdly, which would have set one of them on him, due to them being aggressive towards adults only. Who actually did the bite? Find out later in this video. But the first guard was actually William Afton, which we know due to him having a security badge in the minigames, who had lured the kids in between shifts and then cleaned up his mess at nighttime, which is why the bodies are just kinda there. He then transferred to the day shift after complaining about the animatronics moving around at night, because they're now possessed. But we then later learn that the day shift becomes available suddenly after investigations begin. The first guard is simply running away from the scene, which is why the position of the day shift guard opens up for us to take, which leads to us, Jeremy, being the victim of the bite of 87. Interestingly enough, Fritz gets fired for the same reason as FNAF 1's guard does, implying they are most likely the same person. What are the shadow animatronics? Find out here. We now have added a few events to the timeline here that are 100% guaranteed. But see, by going game by game, we can keep a guaranteed and 100% timeline with absolutely no confusion. Moving on to FNAF 3, and the story is fairly easily shown to us. The game takes place in 2023, taking place 30 years after FNAF 1 closes in 1993, and we learn that Fredbear's had 2 Springlock suits, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, who is now this game's villain, Springtrap. We learn that the original animatronics got destroyed by William in the now closed FNAF 1 location, who comes out of a safe room each time, a room that is off camera and not coded into the animatronic maps, who inadvertently frees the spirits of the missing children, and they then band together inside of the safe room to scare William into the Spring Bonnie suit. The water and moisture in the room then causes the spring locks to activate and trap William within the suit, causing him to bleed out. The safe rooms are boarded up, but eventually when people are trying to create a new location named Fazbear's Fright, a place based on the previous events and mysteries surrounding Fazbear's Entertainment's past, they find their hidden Springlock suit, some old training tapes, and put all of it in the new location. However, unknowingly to them, Springtrap is alive. This causes FNAF 3 to occur, and by the end the entire location is burned to the ground, presumably by the Night Guard. The Night Guard is often theorized to be the same guard that has connections to FNAF 1 and 2, as they would have to see the past animatronics to get hallucinations of them. And why would a random guy set fire to this entire franchise? This would then be the end of the Night Guard's character too. Any items salvaged are sold at a public auction, although brightening up the newspaper, we see that Springtrap lives. After the location burns and all the spirits are dealt with, we reach Happiest Day, where the 5 missing children and the puppet are all freed and move on. This now staying for good at the end of the timeline. We also learn that after incidents at a sister location, most likely Fredbear's, the Springlock suits were retired and put into the other location, but was later moved. This would tell us that Fredbear's was definitely shut before the missing children's incident happened. If we want to get real specific, technically the missing children's incident starts the very next night after the Springlocks are retired and Fredbear's shuts. Now we have added to the timeline here. This is what the original timeline was. Literally every single character that was introduced within these 3 games all had their stories start and end, even the Night Guards. Only things questionable are the dates of the original Fredbear's and Freddy's opening and closing, but besides that, the story's finished. FNAF 4 then came around with more mystery, and Scott was successful in it being a mystery, as this was the first time MatPat was told he was wrong, and the story surrounding FNAF 4 was left unsolved. Although that was because we first thought about it in the wrong way. We thought we were playing as the crying child, also known as the kid we play as in the night end minigames. But no, all of the minigames take place years and years prior to the gameplay, all in the year 1983, therefore making this the Bite of 83 and not the Bite of 87 that most theories around that time assumed. We know this due to an Easter egg revealing Fredbear and friends, but that Easter egg also reveals that the Freddys location was actually open at the same time as Fredbear's. So this means that the Bite of 83 occurred, leading to the place shutting down and the spring-lock suits being put in the first Freddy's location that was already open, which then the suit is moved shortly after, causing the missing children's incident to occur, which leads to the first Freddy's to close. This game gives all the questionable dates a date, and sets everything up to happen in 1983. The gameplay truly is just a nightmare, but not of the crying child, of the older brother, who bullies his younger brother and causes the bite to happen. The hospital equipment is in his nightmares because he is remembering what happened to his brother, being sent to hospital and kept alive for one more night before passing away. We hear a distorted FNAF 1 phone call to finally bring the night guard's story together, because the older brother is the FNAF 1 guard who hears that same phone call, who gets fired for the same reason as FNAF 2's third guard, and is the one who ends it all as the FNAF 3 guard. This older brother is our official main protagonist of FNAF. We have played as him in every game, and we finally learn why. He accidentally kills his younger brother, which leads to the antagonist of the story, William, and protagonist of the story, the older brother. He eventually ends his family's horrible legacy and frees himself from his guilt by burning himself and his murderous father William, closing his family's book for good. Moving on, and there's something I've always been confused about. If FNAF Sister Location wasn't even planned during FNAF 4 times, then whose room was this meant to be? By association, we can assume it's meant to be the daughter of Afton and sister of the crying child and older brother, which we can assume by the fact it's literally the crying child's room, but just pink instead. Jumping to the future, yes, it's Elizabeth. But back then, before Elizabeth existed, who was it? Who was William's daughter? Is it possible that this is what was retconned? Hear me out and let me explain. But I think back in 2015 in FNAF 4, the game to end the story, who we now know as Charlie was William's daughter. Think about it, within the games we never had a Henry at this point. We only truly had William. We have 2 sets of 5 kids killed, but Charlie was killed alone and the first ever? While yes, this goes into dangerous what were William's motives territory, because why would he kill his own kid first? It's the only murder that's not in a batch. And as far as we know, she was never reported missing because William wouldn't have done so. Why in the FNAF book trilogy is Circus Baby, who we know is just Elizabeth, William's daughter in the games, actually a Charlie clone? Yes, we learn in the final book that Baby eventually gets Elizabeth too, but even in that moment, it's just Charlie as Baby. Weird details, weird things going on, I know, but all in all, I think before Henry, that's what Charlie originally was. William's daughter, and her character in itself was retconned. Her room became Elizabeth's room instead, and her father became his business partner Henry instead. But that's just a theory that belongs in 2015. One of the things to clear up is that we know Fredbear's was shut before the missing children's incident, so we know that Crying Child saw something else. But what? Well, currently in the timeline, all we have before this is simply the puppet's possession / her death at Fredbear's, so that could be what he saw. Although in a theory livestream hosted by MatPat, Scott released a story clue that said, what is seen in the shadows is easily misunderstood in the mind of a child, which could just imply that this scene here could have been what he saw, and that he misunderstood it as a murder or a stuffing, although either way works. Another thing, who's speaking from the Fredbear plush at the end? We know William has been speaking to him in the first few minigames, trying to keep his son safe and monitoring what he's doing, but then in his deathbed, or coma, or whatever we call this, the font color changes, and the older brother is speaking and apologizing for everything, although it changes again, but not returning back to its original color. I think that this is the puppet, who always guides the spirits in the series. But what are they doing? How is the puppet putting him back together? What about the box that we see at the end of the game? What is in it in 2016? Well, we'll get back to those two questions in the FNAF World section, but for now, let's relook at the timeline. We've now added to the timeline and reached another 100% checkpoint here. Here we see the original timeline, after the game that was called the final chapter, and the story is actually quite simple and complete. The only issue that we had years ago was missing the 83 TV and misinterpreting the FNAF 1 phone call, which spawned Dream Theory instead of a timeline placement. Skipping FNAF World for reasons I'll get into later, and we head into FNAF Sister Location. This game had quite a self-explanatory story within its gameplay. We play as Mike, who we later learn is named Michael Afton, the son of William Afton. He is sent down into Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals by his father William to free his sister, who previously got killed by Circus Baby, leading to possessing the machine. We learn through a newspaper article on ScottGames.com that the location was called Circus Baby's Pizza World, featuring all the Funtime animatronics as well, and the grand opening was cancelled due to William's daughter's death that occurred during a testing day that featured only a few kids here and there, although he claimed its cancellation was due to gas leaks. It also reads that the equipment, aka animatronics, were taken out of the building before it went to sale, back into the game, and it ends with Enid, containing all the Funtime animatronics, scooping out Michael's organs entirely, so it can then enter his body to finally leave the location and be free. Since the body is dead though, unexpectedly to Enid, it rots and becomes unusable. So Enid leaves the body, and Michael seemingly comes back to life because now he can't die. Michael then swears to come and find Springtrap, who is now 100% confirmed to have survived the fire. In a secret ending, it's also confirmed that William Afton was talking through the Fredbear plush originally. The events seem pretty easy to understand, but what about their timeline placement? Well, Circus Baby's Pizza World should take place before the Bite of 83, due to post-closing, Afton was still using the Fredbear plush to talk to his son, the crying child. There is also a Springlock suit in entertainment and rentals that belongs and came from Pizza World, meaning it must have been opened before the Springlock suits are then confirmed across all locations to be decommissioned after Fredbear's closes, which we learn itself was opened and already connected to entertainment and rentals, which was specifically made for the Funtime animatronics after Pizza World closed. But one single line ruins all of this.
Due to the massive success, and even more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
But what if it doesn't ruin necessarily all of it? Circus Baby's Pizza World never actually opened. It was cancelled, remember? We also learn all the talk about the location stopped. So, it's Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals that was the location that opened after the first Freddy's closes. Because in the very next sentence, which a lot of people seem to forget or disregard for some reason, is that hand unit begins to describe how,
unlike most entertainment venues, our robotic entertainers are rented out for private parties during the day. And it's your job to get the robots back in proper working order before the following morning.
Which means the location he's talking about that opened after the first Freddy's closes isn't the one where they would be on stage, because they are only rented out and are sent down to be fixed during the night. All this line changes is that Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rentals stayed as William's private workshop until after Freddy's closes, to which it opens to the public for rentals. We learned that the Funtime animatronics were only built in the first place to lure and capture children, which is how William's daughter dies back in 1983, although she doesn't die first in the timeline. That's still the puppet, who we already know dies first thanks to everything we've known before this, and also due to what's said in the upcoming years in FNAF 6. But what about Sister Location itself? It now has a literal 40-year span to take place in. Although to 100% this now and clear any future confusion, let's quickly take information from the future, where in FNAF 6 we see the blueprints of the Scooper, describing Remnant, and straight after that it shows Morton Freddy. We also learn that the fourth closet's showcase of Remnant and Candy Cadet's stories of 5 becoming 1, all lead us to the conclusion that after the FNAF 1 suits were destroyed and dismantled, William gathered the remnant of the missing children, which was then put into the Scooper's remnant reserver, but due to him being spring-trapped, he was unable to inject the Funtime animatronics with it, but they are all then eventually scooped in Sister Location on purpose, which leads to Enid, soon Molten Freddy, having remnant inside of it. We also know this due to how post-Enid, Michael says he's going to find his father William, and he was hiding in shadows. So he doesn't know where William is until FNAF 3's location opens, which he comes out of hiding and goes to end it all with fire, which unfortunately fails. Before we finish off with Sister Location, I must mention the Breaker Room map itself. It definitely confirms that the Afton's home and Fredbear's are all connected to Circus Baby's entertainment and rentals, but it also seems to imply that some sort of animatronic experiments were actually happening in the FNAF 4 locations that then later become nightmares for Michael. We know this due to how dots are everywhere animatronics would be, such as Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, Plushtrap, and the FNAF 4 animatronics. The fact Michael has nightmares of these exact movement patterns could possibly mean that Michael endured these experiments in the past, due to William, possibly as a punishment after he caused the death of his younger brother. Although what the dots mean and why their locations are named observations are simply left up to interpretation. We only know for certain that Michael endures FNAF 4's nightmares, but we don't know what the map's dots are actually implying. This is the last we ever see or hear of this map, and its possible implications. And this is not cleared up later. So we now arrive at this timeline, 100% guaranteed. Now we move on to the next game, which has some questions, but overall gives us an ending to a lot of the unsolved mysteries, and gives us a game introduction to William's business partner and co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment, who was originally introduced in the books, Henry Emily. We know this is Henry due to the secret HRY223 tapes, which stands for Henry 2023, which marks this game in the year 2023 as well. We learn that between FNAF 3 and this game, Springtrap has become Scraptrap, which I go over how here. We also learn from the source code of both FNAFworld.com and ScottGames.com, the rest of NARD has split up with Circus Baby in an argument, which causes there being both Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy. We also learn that the kid who possessed the puppet is Henry's daughter, Charlotte, nicknamed Charlie, which we can freely take from the books too. Henry then builds Lefty to lure and capture the puppet, and bring her to the new restaurant, which he created specifically to lure everyone left over into, so he can then burn it down and release everyone and everything. Michael ends up working there, so Henry assumes he doesn't want to escape the fire, and instead die knowing it's all over. The location then burns down, and Fazbear Entertainment Incorporated is no longer a corporate entity. The only real mystery that lingers from this game is what the Midnight Motorist minigame means. Although I had this theory earlier, I now think something else. I think all the FNAF 6 secret minigames are showing us the firsts of the franchise. We know that Charlie is the first ever to die in the entire story, security puppet minigame. We learn in Ultimate Custom Night that Susie, who possesses Chica, was the first to die in the missing children's incident, Fruity Maze minigame. We then learn that Midnight Motorist takes place possibly after Charlie's death too, but recent theories, which I'm not sure who it originated from, suggest that it might actually take place after Crying Child's death instead, who was the first to die from an animatronic. This would fit the pattern, and explains away a few plot holes that come with the other theory. Mainly that this can't be Michael because he is never known to be nice and care for assumedly his younger brother. He outright bullies him enough which leads to his death in FNAF 4, so why would he be nice all of a sudden? Another plot hole is why would an animatronic randomly appear outside Crying Child's window, which lures him to the place? But we know in FNAF 4 he's always trying to get away from animatronics. Well, Michael is the one who ran off to that place again, the place possibly being the mound where the Crying Child is buried, after possibly seeing a vision of something that resembles Crying Child, whether that was Fredbear or Shadow Freddy, who both have 3 toes. People have also speculated that this is instead Mrs. Afton, watching TV, telling him to take it easy on their son. Finally, to wrap up this game, we are given the names for our original missing children in the same order of FNAF 3's ending. Freddy is possessed by Gabriel, Foxy by Fritz, Chica by Susie, and Jeremy by Bonnie. We have another gravestone representing the puppet, watching over the others, that confirms Henry's daughter is named Charlotte in this timeline too, due to its long name. This being the reason it's not actually covered, because we technically already have this name. Then the name of the gravestone covered by grass, we later learn in the ultimate guide can be solved in the survival logbook, which has been solved to be Cassidy, the 5th victim, and Golden Freddy. So now here is our current timeline, and what seemingly was the end of FNAF, although once again that end didn't last very long. Moving on to Ultimate Custom Night, and it becomes pretty straightforward upon unlocking all of its secrets. We play as William Afton, who has been trapped here thanks to Golden Freddy, possessed by Cassidy, the one you should not have killed, and is putting William through this entire experience. Pretty straightforward, except we're given some new and interesting details. We hear a few strange lines from Toy Chica within this game, specifically that she wants to
eat you,
and asks,
"Where's my beak?" "Lodged in your forehead, of course."
But wait, why was Toy Chica occasionally missing her beak in FNAF 2, which is then noted as an important detail in FNAF 4, and now this game? Well, the frontal lobe is located directly behind the forehead. Could this all seemingly be implying that Toy Chica was the one who committed the bite of 87? It's possible. But wait, Old Man Consequences from FNAF World is here. Why? Does that mean we actually have to talk about FNAF World? Well, Scott said in an interview with Dorco that he did try to somehow tie it into the canon, which he now regrets. And the biggest thing of all, the FNAF 4 locked box is literally open in the files. So yes, it's canon, and has some lore we must talk about, namely the box. According to Scott, the contents of the box are simply the pieces put together. So if the box is opened in FNAF World, what does that mean? At the end of the FNAF World intro, the mysterious eyes tell you that everything that happens out there has an effect in here, meaning that we are outside reality, for a better word. It also says how they'll put you back together, so we can safely say that those eyes are the Fredbear plush. Specifically the puppet spirit who says the same thing in FNAF 4, and they are talking to the crying child. But right after this promise, FNAF World begins. In the dialogue later during the gameplay, we learn that we have to leave breadcrumbs for him to help him find his way. In the clock ending, the puppet continues to say that the pieces are in place for you, all you have to do is find them. Finally, found an update to his teaser on scottgames.com, it's noted how he put the pieces back together. So this boy that we know from earlier would be the crying child did successfully find the pieces and put them back together thanks to FNAF World and with the help of the puppet, which all in all leads to the box being open and unlocked in FNAF World. But what are those pieces that together create the box? Well, that can be answered due to what leads to the clock ending where we learn about the pieces that are in place for him. It's all a bunch of references to how to achieve the happiest day ending in FNAF 3. The Balloon Boy minigame, punching in this wall code to get the Mangle minigame, the Chica minigame, the code that leads to the Fredbear minigame, and finally the Shadow Bunny minigame. They are all here. So what are the pieces that need to be put together? The FNAF 3 minigames. So if the box is the pieces the FNAF 3 minigames put together, that means that inside the box is happiest day. Obviously they're not actual games that can be completed, but it's all representing memory. We know this because in the fourth closet the dead forget, but their memories can be restored, and in the book the memories are literally put together by Carlton, which after finally lets them move on and rest. It would also make sense to why he now regrets tying it into the canon, and why he says the box's contents changed due to how he thought the community would think about the answer. FNAF World wasn't necessarily liked by the community at the time, therefore the answers to one of the biggest mysteries being the box, being in FNAF World, wouldn't really be liked either. But wait, you may be wondering that if Crying Child does all of that, and that's how the puppet put him back together, then that means that he can't be possessing Golden Freddy, because the puppet wouldn't guide him into Fredbear in this case. Well, simply, that just means that he is not Golden Freddy, with the 5th victim. I've always thought it strange that every single animatronic in this entire franchise is 1-to-1, as in this kid possesses this animatronic. But then for Golden Freddy, we suddenly drop that rule and say that it's the only animatronic in this entire series so far to have 2 spirits. So what if that's just not the case then? The survival logbook itself doesn't have to mean that the 2 spirits are talking through the same body. So just to recap, because I know it's a lot to take in, the crying child dies, then outside of reality in the soul world or something like that, the puppet uses his memories to help put him back together. And he then helps the puppet create happiest day for the missing children's spirits, which in turn frees everyone. But how does all of this fit in the timeline? I think FNAF World and Ultimate Custom Night happen outside of reality, and all somewhat concurrently at the end of the timeline, with Happiest Day being at the end of everything and freeing all the spirits for good, which might explain why the puppet reaches Golden Freddy last in Happiest Day, and why they don't have the mask on already unlike the others. This is after Ultimate Custom Night, after Old Man Consequences representing the puppet spirit who technically created FNAF World and in turn this character suggests they rest, which eventually works, and the Golden Freddy mask is finally put on, and they are all freed. This leads us to this original timeline, where for the first time, to me, it seems like everything is seemingly answered. Moving on to FNAF Help Wanted, and we continue our somewhat easy to understand and or solve momentum. It's unsure how long after the end of the original timeline this occurs, but Fazbear Entertainment is eventually revived, and becomes an LLC, limited liability company. Thanks to MatPat for realizing that. They hire a random indie game developer to create a video game series that is not our game series that we've been playing up until this point, based on the myths and rumours of Fazbear Entertainment's past. We learn later that he was only able to finish 3, which would be why they are the only ones titled FNAF 1 to 3, and everything past that are simply just custom game modes. Although at first they lied about the indie game developer to seemingly everyone, and even later the public, that they were an employee gone rogue, who created the video game series to tarnish their name. They then decide to create a virtual reality game to regain the public's trust, and poke fun at the rumours of Fazbear's past. They hire a game company named Silver Parasol Games to create the game. During development, they mysteriously receive circuit boards by an unknown person, who tells them to scan the code to hopefully speed up development, although when it's all said and done, they had scanned over a virus into their system. Jeremy, a member on the team, began to be taken over by an anomaly, who we now know as Glitchtrap, a glitch in the game which ended up driving him crazy by seemingly entering his mind, only for him to cut his own face off with a guillotine paper slicer in order to stop the anomaly from taking control. After this death in the workplace, Fazbear Entertainment was scared that they were going to retrieve a lawsuit, but they continued either way. Who we only know as Tape Girl takes over Jeremy's work, picking up where he left off, meaning noticing Glitchtrap and trying to stop it, creating tapes along the way of her progress. Then FNAF Help Wanted plays out exactly how it seems. Us playing as a girl named Vanessa, whose name we later learn. She then plays through the game and unknowingly assembles Glitchtrap, and she ends up being taken over by it. As we see here, this all sits easy at the end after FNAF 6. This game didn't present a whole lot of mystery and all the information was given to us pretty clearly with its order of events. However, here is where clear ends. YouTubers who focus on AR and security breach like FNAF say it's mostly confusing due to the fact that Illumix seem to have been creating a story post-Help Wanted, which then Stillwell Studios picked and dropped certain aspects of said story when creating Security Breach. The only things that we can be certain on until hopefully the Ruin DLC and or Tales epilogues reveal a lot more is that Vanessa goes to therapy sessions after being infected with the Glitchtrap virus and starts acting weirdly in the workplace, searching up and ordering weird things. She then eventually creates her own mascot suit, which she calls Vanny. Fazbear Entertainment then direct their focus to creating Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, a brand new location featuring the new Rockstar animatronics that is built above the FNAF 6 location. Vanessa is mysteriously hired by someone at the top of Fazbear Entertainment, despite having no experience. This all leads to Security Breach, where we play as a random kid named Gregory, who is trapped inside the Pizzaplex, and so he has to survive from the animatronics, now infected with Glitchtrap's virus, and Vanny until 6 AM when the doors reopen. Although there are a multitude of different endings, so I can't actually tell you which one is canon. Besides the main gameplay story that we are outright shown and told in Security Breach, nothing else seems 100% certain, and it doesn't feel like it will be until the Ruin DLC, and all the Tales epilogues help us with creating that timeline of specific events. Also, there is almost definitely a robot within this game, somewhere. Personally, I think the video made by ID's Fantasy about the post-it room and robots within it has nailed it. Instead of just going over her points and covering the video, go check out her video instead. So with the little information we're working with, we can certainly 100% the additions to the timeline here, all being post-Help Wanted. We learn a few things from the Fazbear Fright and Tales from the Pizzaplex to fill in some of the blanks, like the Shadow animatronics, the Phantoms, and Scraptrap. And one thing I haven't mentioned yet, the missing children's incident apparently happened in 1985, in both this series and the original book trilogy. All this does is basically negates every single thing needing to happen in 1983, and instead moves the Freddy's plot to the end in 1985, making this final timeline, if you want to consider 1985 the now truth. I've already explained about 8 to 9 reasons why the books, besides the Tales epilogues, don't take place in the game timeline here. Well, that's it. That's the entire main FNAF timeline, start to finish. For now, subscribe, turn on notifications, and welcome to 2023.